My name is Orrin Halloway, and for 11 years my whole world was the night shift at Mahler Orbital Transit Hub, Ring 3, somewhere out past the cold edge of the Corin Belt. I pushed a cleaning cart down corridors that never quite went dark, and I called it a life because it was the only one I had left. I want to tell you about the smallest thing that ever changed everything. It was about the size of my two hands cupped together, and it had 4 ears, and it could not eat. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me set the scene the way it actually was, because if you have never stood on the underside of a spinning ring at 3 in the morning, you cannot understand how loud silence gets. Mahler Hub was a way station, a wheel of steel and ceramic where 100 species changed ships, traded goods, and moved on. By day it roared. Merchants from the Vol Combine bartered in clicks and flashing skin. Tall, blue-gray oral pilots argued fares. Cargo loaders the size of small trucks hummed past on magnetic rails. It was the crossroads of a whole arm of the galaxy, and nobody who passed through ever once looked at the man with the mop. That was fine by me. I had stopped wanting to be looked at a long time ago. My wife, Rena, had died 4 years before I took the job. Our daughter, Paya, had been 6 then. By the time this story starts, Paya was 10, and she lived with me in a crew bunk barely wider than my outstretched arms, 2 decks down from the concourse. She slept while I worked. I worked so she could sleep somewhere warm, somewhere with air that didn't cost extra, somewhere a child could grow up even if the only sky she'd ever known was painted on a curved ceiling. A janitor on a transit ring does not make much. I made enough for the bunk, enough for Paya's schooling feed, enough for 1 decent meal a day if I was careful. I was always careful. Most nights my supper was a ration brick the company handed out, dense and gray and tasting of nothing, but a brick was a brick and it kept the lights on inside a man. I'd eat half, save half for the long stretch before dawn. That habit is important. Remember the half. The night it began, I was working the Gamma Transfer Lounge, the deep one, the part of the ring where the long-haul freighters dock and almost nobody waits because almost nobody wants to go where those ships go. The lounge was empty. The big viewport showed the belt outside, slow tumbling rocks lit silver by a sun too far away to warm anything. I had my cart, my mop, my brick in my coat pocket, and the particular piece of a man who expects nothing to happen. Then I heard it. A sound I had never heard in 11 years on the ring. It was small, a thin, broken little cry, the kind of sound that goes straight past your ears and grabs something older in your chest. I followed it the way you follow a leak, head tilted, listening, and I found it behind the recycling bank in the corner, wedged into the warm gap where the air handlers vented. It was an animal, or I thought it was an animal. About the size of a loaf of bread, covered in short fur the color of wet ash, with a long ring tail curled tight around itself and 4 ears, 2 big and 2 small, all of them flat back against its skull in fear. It had a flat little face, almost a kitten's face, and enormous dark eyes that caught the light and threw it back gold. When it saw me, it tried to make itself smaller. It could not. There was nowhere smaller to go. "Hey," I said, because that is what you say. "Hey now, easy." It cried again, that same thin sound, and I understood with a strange certainty that it was hungry. Don't ask me how. Maybe a man who has watched his own child go hungry learns the sound on a level beneath language. I knelt down slow, the way you do, knees popping, and I took the brick out of my pocket and broke off a corner and held it out flat on my palm the way you'd offer sugar to a horse. The little thing looked at the brick, looked at me, and then it spoke. "Sir," it said, in a voice like a bell wrapped in cloth, small and clear and absolutely impossible, "I can't eat." I will not pretend I didn't drop the brick. I sat down hard on the deck, which at my age is not a graceful thing, and I stared at the talking ash-colored animal in the air handler vent, and the talking animal stared back at me with its 4 ears slowly, cautiously coming up off its skull. "You can talk," I said, brilliant. "The wit of Orrin Halloway, ladies and gentlemen." "A little," it said. "I learned from the speaker boxes, the ones that say which ship is leaving." It paused. Its nose, a tiny pink thing, worked at the air. I can't eat the gray block, it will hurt me. The gray block is for your kind, my kind needs the green. It looked away, ashamed, and I have never in my life seen a creature so small carry so much shame. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take your food. I only smelled it. Now, I want to be honest with you about the kind of man I was that night, because the man I became is the whole point of this story, and you can't see how far a thing has traveled if you don't know where it started. I was tired. I was poor. I had a daughter 2 decks down who needed every credit I could scrape, and the smart thing, the safe thing, the thing that 11 years of a hard life had trained into me, was to report the stray to station security, let them deal with it, and go back to my mop. Strays got swept. That was the law on a transit ring. Anything unticketed, uncrewed, and unclaimed was contraband, and contraband got bagged and put out the airlock or sold, whichever paid better. I knew that. The little thing in the vent knew it too. I could see it in the way it watched the corridor behind me, ready to run, knowing there was nowhere to run to. And I thought about the green. You need green food, I said slowly. What kind of green? Live things, it said. Small live things, or the paste they make from plants. The galley on Ring 1 has it, for the oral younglings, but the galley is for ticketed passengers. It said the word ticketed the way a child says a word they've heard adults use as a wall. I don't have a ticket. I came on a cargo pod and the pod left without me. So that was it. A stowaway. A child, because that is what it was. I understood that much already. A child of some species I had never seen, separated from whoever it belonged to, dumped on a transfer ring by an accident of cargo timing, hiding behind the recycler, eating nothing because the only food it could reach would poison it. I have told you I had stopped wanting to be looked at. What I had not told you is that somewhere in those 4 years since Rena, I had also stopped looking at anything. I went through my shifts with my eyes on the floor, on the grime, on the next thing to clean, because if I looked up and out, I would have to see how small my life had gotten, and that was a thing I could not afford to see. The little creature made me look up. "What's your name?" I asked. The 4 ears came all the way up. "Tisha," it said. "I think. The sound my mother made was longer, but that is the part I can say." "Tisha," I said. "I'm Oren. I'm going to get you something green. You stay here, you stay quiet, and you do not let anybody see you. Can you do that?" "Why?" said Tisha, and the question stopped me cold because it was not suspicion. It was pure, honest bewilderment. "Why would you help me? You don't have a ticket for me either." I didn't have an answer that would have made sense to a security officer, or to the company, or even to the careful, frightened version of myself that had been running my life for 4 years. So I gave her the only true one. "Because you're hungry," I said, "and I've got hands." The galley on Ring 1 was a 40-minute walk and a transit-spoke ride away, up through the warmer, brighter decks where the ticketed people slept in real cabins. I knew the back ways. A janitor knows every back way on a station. We are the only ones who go everywhere and the only ones nobody watches. I clocked my cart into a service bay, took the maintenance lift, and came up behind the Ring 1 galley through the recycling dock, where I had a nodding acquaintance with the night cook, an old Vol named Skinnett whose carapace had gone the dull bronze of age. Skinnett clicked at me. The translator patch on my collar turned it into words. "Holloway, you're off your ring." "Couldn't sleep," I said. "You got any of the oral youngling paste, the green stuff?" His eye cluster swiveled. "Vol are sharp. You don't run a galley for 40 years without learning to read a lie." But he had known me a long time, in the distant nodding way that night shift people know each other, and he did not ask the question he was thinking. He just reached under the counter and came up with a sealed tube the size of my thumb and set it on the steel. "3 credits, he said, then after a click, "It's 2. The other one's because I'm not asking." I paid him 3. Some debts you pay even when they're waived off. I want to be careful here because I have heard the way stories like this can go, the way an old man and a lost child can be twisted into something ugly by people who look for ugliness. So let me say it plain. I never hid Tisha to keep her. I hid her to keep her alive long enough to get her home. From the very first night, I was looking for the right people to hand her to, the harbor master, the species liaison, anyone official who could find her own kind. The hiding was never the goal. The hiding was the cost of doing the decent thing in a place that had made decency illegal. And I told Paya, that's the other thing. The next morning before I slept, I told my daughter everything, because a man who keeps secrets from his own child in a metal box 2 decks down from the world has lost something he can't get back. Paya was 10, and she had her mother's flat, unimpressed stare, and when I finished she said, "You found a talking space cat and you didn't bring her to meet me." "She's frightened," I said. "So bring me to her," said Paya. "Frightened things like other frightened things, it's how I knew I liked you." Out of the mouths of children. I should tell you what those days were actually like, because it would be easy to skip from "I found her" to "I saved her," and leave out the part that mattered most, which was the ordinary middle of it. The part nobody puts in stories. The waiting. The small, repeated kindnesses that don't look like anything until you add them all up. Every night I'd finish my rounds early if I could, cutting corners on the corridors nobody walked, banking the saved minutes so I could spend them in the Gamma Lounge. I'd come around the recycler with the green tube in my hand, and Tisha would already have heard me. Those 4 ears caught everything. And she'd be sitting up waiting, tail wrapped neat around her feet, and she'd say "Oren" in that bellin cloth voice like my name was a small good thing she'd been saving up to say. Nobody had said my name like that in 4 years. You forget how much you miss being glad to see you. You build a wall around the missing and you call the wall contentment, and then a 4-eared cub says your name like sunrise, and the whole wall comes down in one breath. I'd feed her the paste a little at a time, because she ate slow, savoring, the way a creature eats when it has known what it is to have nothing. And while she ate, she'd talk. She told me about the Sephir worlds, the green ones with 9 suns and real weather, where the clans lived in great woven cities in the canopy, and the young ones learned to climb before they learned to walk. She told me about her mother's voice, and the songs, and the way her people never let a cub sleep alone its first 3 years, because the dark was for grown ones to face and children to be carried through. She did not understand a place like Mahler, where children slept 2 decks down from the world in metal boxes, where a man could be hungry in the middle of the richest crossroads in the arm. She kept asking me to explain it, and I kept failing, because some things can't be explained, only endured, and I did not want to teach her how to endure them. She was too young. She still thought the universe was kind. I wanted to keep her thinking it as long as I could. Paya loved her without complication, the way children love. She started bringing things, a worn blanket the size of a hand towel, a light stick that glowed soft amber, a cracked data slate loaded with the picture books she'd outgrown. She and Tisha would lie head to head on the deck behind the recycler, and Paya would read aloud, and Tisha would correct her pronunciation, which was rich, since Tisha was learning the language second-hand off a station speaker box. But Paya let her, because Paya understood that being allowed to correct someone is its own kind of being needed, and Tisha needed to be needed as much as she needed the green paste. They were 2 lonely children, and they had found each other in the bottom of a steel wheel, and watching them, I understood that I had not rescued Tisha at all. They had rescued each other, and I was only the man with the hands who carried the food. One night Paya fell asleep down there, curled around the cub like a comma around a period, and I sat on a crate and watched the 2 of them breathe, and I did the math I'd been avoiding. 3 credits a night. The relay search could take weeks. My savings, such as they were the thin difference between Paya and the labor contracts, and I was spending that difference 1 green tube at a time on a child who wasn't mine, in a place that would punish me for it. The careful man I'd been for 4 years sat on that crate and added it all up and told me, in a flat, reasonable voice, to stop, to report the cub, to protect my own. And I listened to that voice, I'll admit it. I listened to it for a long time in the dark. Then Tisha, asleep, made a small sound, a frightened sound, the kind of sound a child makes in a bad dream, and without waking my daughter reached out one hand and laid it on the cub's flank, and Tisha quieted. 10 years old, dead asleep and still reaching out in the dark to settle something smaller than herself. And I thought, that is what I am raising. That is the whole of what I am for. And a man who teaches his daughter that the careful thing and the right thing are different things, and then chooses the careful one in front of her, that man has taught her the worst lesson there is. So I stopped listening to the reasonable voice. I went and bought another tube the next night, and the night after, and I ate my gray brick hole and tightened my belt a notch, and I never did the math again. Some sums you're better off not knowing the answer to. So that is how it became the three of us, me, my daughter, and Tisha, in a station that would have spaced all three of our problems without blinking. By day, Tisha stayed in the warm gap behind the gamma recycler, and Paya would come down after her schooling feed and sit cross-legged on the deck, and the two of them would talk in the low, endless way that children talk, about nothing, about everything. Tisha learned faster than any creature I have ever met. Within a week, her sentences were whole. Within 2, she was teasing Paya about the gap in her front teeth, and Paya was teasing her back about her ridiculous fourth ear, and the sound of them laughing down in that empty freight lounge did something to the inside of my chest that I had thought was permanently broken. I fed her the green paste, a tube a night, 3 credits a night, and 3 credits a night is not nothing to a man like me. I ate my brick whole now instead of in halves because I needed every calorie I wasn't spending on Tisha's tubes. I lost weight. Paya noticed and didn't say anything, which is its own kind of love. And in between, I started asking questions, quiet ones, the kind a janitor can ask without anyone wondering why. Tisha's people were called the Sefer. Nobody on Mahler had heard of them, which was strange for a crossroads that had heard of everyone. I worked the question like a stain, a little at a time, night after night, until a freighter captain from far down the outer reaches, a hauler with a hold full of ice and a face like a closed fist, told me the Sefer lived 3 jumps coreward, kept to themselves, traded rarely, and were known for exactly one thing: they never ever abandoned their young. If a Sefer cub was lost, he said, the whole clan would turn a ship around and burn a year's fuel to find it. So if one was lost on a station, I said, and the clan knew where, they'd come, the captain said, fast and angry. Sefer don't negotiate over cubs. He looked at me a beat too long. Why's a mop man asking? Spilled something interesting once, I said, and pushed my cart away, and my heart was going like a drum, because if that was true, then Tisha was not a stray to be smuggled off the ring in secret. She was a daughter, and somewhere out there a family was tearing the dark apart looking for her, and all I had to do was get word to them before station security found her first. That should have been the easy part. It was not, of course. It is never the easy part. The trouble had a name, and the name was Vorik Dane, the night supervisor of station security, a thick-necked man who had been passed over for promotion so many times that the only pleasure left to him was the small cruelty of his rounds. Dane hated me specifically, the way small men hate anyone who refuses to be afraid of them, and Dane had started to notice that the night janitor was buying youngling paste from the Ring 1 galley and walking it down to an empty freight lounge. He cornered me on the 18th night. I had the tube in my pocket and Tisha behind the recycler not 40 feet away, and Dane stood in the lounge hatch with 2 of his deputies and that slow, ugly smile, and he said, "Holloway, what's a man with no kids on the manifest doing buying baby food?" I have never been a fast liar, but I have raised a daughter alone, and there is no faster school for thinking on your feet than a 10-year-old's questions at midnight. "My daughter's got a stomach thing," I said. "Doc put her on the paste. It's gentle. You want to see the prescription, you can wake the doc, but he's Vol and he bites when you wake him." Dane didn't believe me. I could see he didn't. But belief and proof are different animals, and he had no proof, and a supervisor who hauls a janitor in on a hunch and finds nothing looks like a fool in the morning report. So he filed it away behind his eyes, that slow, patient malice, and he said, "I'll be watching, Mop Man," and he left. I went behind the recycler and Tisha was shaking, all 4 ears flat, and Paya was there. She'd come down early, and she had put her small body between Tisha and the corridor, 10 years old and ready to fight a grown man with a stun baton, and I have never been prouder or more frightened in my life. "We have to move you," I told Tisha. "Tonight, he'll come back. He'll bring a scanner next time and a scanner will find you and then it's the airlock or the auction block and I will not let either of those things happen. Do you understand me?" "Where," whispered Tisha, "where is there to go?" And here is where the small thing in this story turns into the large thing. Because the answer to where was the answer I had been circling for 18 nights without letting myself see it. The Harbor Master's Relay. Every transit ring has one, a deep space comm array that pings the long-haul lanes, the one piece of equipment powerful enough to throw a message 3 jumps coreward and have it heard. It sat at the hub of the wheel, the dead center, in the old core that predated the rest of the station, a place so old and so automated that no living crew went there anymore. If I could get Tisha to the relay, and if she could give me enough of her clan's call sign or world name or whatever the Sefer used, I could send a message into the dark and tell her family exactly where she was. The only problem was that the old core was sealed. The access ways were a maze of decommissioned corridors that hadn't seen light in decades, and the route ran straight through 3 security checkpoints. For anyone else it was impossible. But I was the janitor. I had the master maintenance key, the real one, the physical one they'd issued me 11 years ago and forgotten to ever take back. And a janitor knows every back way on a station. We went that night, the 3 of us, down into the cold, dead heart of the ring. I carried Tisha in a tool bag with the top open so she could breathe and see, and Paya held my hand in the dark, and I led them through maintenance crawlways I had cleaned 100 times and never once thought of as a road to anywhere. The deeper we went, the colder it got, and the older everything looked, hand-lettered signs in a script no one used anymore, hatches with manual wheels, the bones of the first station they'd built out here before the wheel grew up around it. I knew these passages, but I had only ever known them in pieces, the way you know the back of your own house room by room without ever thinking of it as a single shape. Now I was stringing the pieces into a route, and I found that my hands remembered things my head had forgotten, which wheel valve stuck, which deck plate rang hollow, which junction the maps got wrong because the maps had been drawn from a blueprint, and I had been drawn from 11 years of walking it. There is a knowledge that lives in the body of a working man that no engineer ever writes down. That night it was the only map I had, and it did not fail me once. We passed a viewport so old its seal had gone amber, and through it I could see the belt turning, the same silver rocks I cleaned the windows on every shift, and from down here in the cold bones of the place they looked different, not a view to be maintained but a thing of genuine and terrible beauty, and I understood that I had spent 11 years polishing a window I had never once looked through. Paya pressed her face to the old glass and Tisha climbed half out of the bag to see, and for a moment the 3 of us just stood in the dark looking out at the turning belt, fugitives in the basement of the world, and it was, against all sense, one of the finest moments of my life. Twice we heard Dane's patrol on the decks above, boots ringing on steel, and twice we froze in the dark and waited, Tisha so still in the bag I could feel her tiny heart going against my forearm like a trapped bird. Paya never made a sound. My daughter, who could not sit still through a school feed, held herself frozen in a freezing corridor for 10 minutes at a stretch because she understood, in the wordless way children understand the important things, that the stakes were real. The second time, when the boots had faded, Tisha whispered up out of the bag, so quiet I felt it more than heard it, "Are you afraid?" And I told her the truth, which was yes, and she said, "Me too," and then, after a moment, "But I am less afraid in your hands than I was alone. I have been paid many things in my life, wages mostly, and not enough of them. That sentence is the richest I have ever been. The old core was a cathedral. That's the only word. A great dim spherical chamber at the dead center of the spin, where the gravity went strange and light and our feet barely touched the deck. And there in the middle on a column of cabling sat the relay, an ancient thing, all exposed circuit and patient blinking light, still faithfully throwing its pings into the dark after all these years because no one had ever told it to stop. There is something in an old machine still doing its duty that has always undone me a little, maybe because I am one. I set Tisha on the console and she looked tiny against all that hardware and I said, "Can you tell them where you are? Your people? Can you give me a word, a name, a number, anything I can send?" She was quiet a long moment. Then she said, "There is a song. My mother sang it. It is how we say which clan, which world. I don't know your words for it, but I can sing it and the relay can carry the sound and any Sepher who hears will know it is one of us, lost, and they will read the sending marks for where." "Then sing it," I said, "sing it into this." I rigged the relay to broadcast. A janitor knows enough about the guts of a station to make a microphone live, and I held the pickup down by that small ash-colored face, and Tisha closed her enormous gold eyes and she sang. I will not try to write the song down. I couldn't. It was not made of notes the way our music is. It was high and strange and it folded back on itself, and it filled that old cathedral of a chamber and went up the column of cabling and out into the antenna and into the dark, 3 jumps coreward, into the night where her family was tearing the universe apart looking for her. Paya was crying. I was not far off. Even the old relay seemed to lean into it. Every light along its spine pulsing in time, an ancient machine and a lost child making one sound together in the cold center of the wheel. We sent it 9 times. Then we went back to the warm decks before the day shift woke, and we waited. Dane found the relay tampering on the 3rd day. Of course he did. He wasn't a fool, only a small man, and a small man with a grudge is patient. He traced the broadcast log, and he came for me on the 4th night with 4 deputies and a pair of magnetic cuffs, and that slow, ugly smile turned all the way up, because he finally had his proof. Unauthorized use of station comms, harboring contraband, the works. Enough to space the cat, sell the daughter's father to a labor contract, and break the family for good. He marched me to the main concourse in cuffs, in front of the whole night crowd, because humiliation was the part he liked best. Paya they made walk beside me. Tisha they had in a containment box, a clear plastic cube with air holes, and she was pressed against the wall of it with all 4 ears flat, and the sight of her in that box is a thing I will carry to my grave. 11 years, Dane said loud for the crowd. 11 years pushing a mop and you throw it away for a piece of vermin. You know what this is? He held up the containment box. This is salvage. This is mine now. And you, mop man, you're going to spend the rest of your short life regretting that you ever. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't finish it because the whole station rang like a struck bell, a deep bone-shaking toll that came up through the deck and into our teeth. And every light in the concourse flickered, and the great viewport that looked out over the belt went dark, not switched off, blocked, eclipsed, as something enormous slid across the field of stars and stopped. It was a ship, but ship is too small a word, the way Tisha had been too small a creature to change a man's whole life. It was a vessel the size of a moon, dark and curved and grown rather than built, and it filled the viewport and then filled the next viewport and the next, and it kept coming until it hung over Mahler Hub like a closed hand over a beetle. Smaller ships poured out of it, dozens, hundreds, swift dark shapes that swarmed the ring's docking spines, and the comm boards lit up all at once with a sound the whole station heard through every speaker on every deck. It was the song, Tisha's song, sung back at us by 10,000 voices. The Sepher had come. They came aboard at the Gamma Lock, because that is where the message had originated, and they had read the sending marks down to the meter. The first of them through the hatch was taller than me by half, walking upright. The same ash-gray fur and ringed tail and 4 ears and enormous gold eyes. draped in something between armor and ceremony, and behind it came a dozen more, and the deputies took one look at that and dropped their stun batons on the deck with a clatter, because there are some odds even a cruel man can count. The tall Sephir's eyes swept the concourse, the crowd, the deputies, Dane with the containment box still stupidly held up in one hand, and then those eyes found the box and found Tisha pressed against the inside of it, and the sound that came out of that tall, fierce creature was not a war cry. It was a mother's sound. I have made that sound myself, the night they told me about Rena. It crosses every species there is. Tisha screamed back, one word, a name longer than any sound I could make, and clawed at the box. Dane, to his eternal stupidity, tried to bargain. "Now hold on," he said. "This is station salvage. There's a process. There's a fee." And he never got further than that because the tall Sephir crossed the concourse in 3 strides that barely touched the floor and took the box out of his hand so gently, so precisely, that he didn't even resist, and opened it. And Tisha went up into those arms and buried her face in that ash-gray fur, and made a sound of such pure relief that the whole concourse, every species of it, went silent. I thought that was the end of my part. I genuinely did. I stood there in my cuffs and thought, well, she's home. That's what mattered, and whatever they do to me now was worth it. I caught Paya's eye and tried to tell her with my face that it was all right, that I'd done a good thing and good things cost what they cost. Then Tisha lifted her head from her mother's shoulder, and she pointed one small paw straight at me, and she said something long in her own tongue, and the whole rank of Sephir turned to look at the janitor in the cuffs. The tall one, her mother, the matriarch, I learned later her title meant something close to clan mother, crossed to me. Up close, those gold eyes were ancient and unbearably gentle. She reached out and with one claw, delicately, snapped the magnetic cuffs off my wrists like they were paper. Then she did something I did not expect and have never forgotten. She lowered her great head until her brow touched mine, the way I had seen Tisha do to Paya when they said good night, and she held it there. And through the translator patch still clipped to my collar, a single phrase came through, the only words of human speech any of them had bothered to learn, taught no doubt by a cub who had learned them from a station speaker box. "You had hands," the clan mother said, "and you used them for my child." I did not have a reply. There isn't one. You don't reply to that. You just stand there and let it be true. What happened to Dane is a small satisfaction, and I'll give it to you quickly, because the audience for a story like this has earned one clean note of justice. The Sephir do not have laws about salvage, but they have very firm ideas about creatures who cage children for profit, and when the matriarch learned from Tisha, who left nothing out, exactly what Dane had intended for her, she did not harm him. That is not their way. Instead, she had her people purchase his contract from the station company, every credit of it on the spot, which made Vorik Dane the legal property of the Sephir clan for the term of his employment, and then she set him to the one duty she deemed fitting. He spends his days now in the youngling halls of that moon-sized ship, 3 jumps coreward, cleaning up after several hundred Sephir cubs. A mop man after all. I'm told he's gotten quite good at it. I'm told the cubs adore him, which may be the cruelest sentence Dane has ever served, and the most likely to save him. But that came later. On the night itself, on the concourse, with the cuffs off my wrists and a moon-sized ship hanging over my station and the whole crowd starring, the clan mother straightened up and asked me, through the patch, what I wished for myself. I want to tell you I asked for something noble. I want to tell you I asked for peace between our peoples, or knowledge, or some grand thing worthy of the moment. What I actually did was look down at my daughter, at Paya with her flat, unimpressed stare gone soft and wet, at the kid who'd put her body between a frightened cub and a grown man's stun baton, and I said the only true thing I had, the same kind of true thing I'd said in the freight lounge 18 nights before. I just want my girl to grow up somewhere with a real sky, I said. She's never seen one. Painted ceilings her whole life. That's all. That's the whole list. The clan mother looked at Paya for a long moment. Then she looked at me, and those ancient gold eyes did something I would swear was a smile. "The Sephir worlds have 9 skis," she said. "She may choose." So that is how a janitor and his daughter came to leave Mahler Orbital Transit Hub, Ring 3, on a ship the size of a moon, 3 jumps coreward, to a green world with real weather and a real horizon, and a sun close enough to warm a child's face. I never pushed another cart. Paya grew up under open air with a 4-eared sister who teases her about the gap in her teeth to this day. Both of them too old now for the gap or the teasing to make any sense, and neither of them willing to give it up. I am an old man now, older than I ever expected to get, on a world I never expected to see. Tisha is grown, taller than her mother was, and she has cubs of her own, and the smallest of them, the one with the crooked 4th ear, the one who reminds me most of her mother at that age, climbed into my lap last evening as the first of the 9 suns went down, and asked me to tell the story again. The story of how her mother was lost, and how a man with a gray block of food and 2 empty hands chose to fill them. I told it the way I've told it here, and when I got to the end, to the part where the clan mother touched her brow to mine, the little one looked up at me with those enormous gold eyes and asked me the same question her mother asked, 11 years and a whole life ago, behind a recycler on a cold and spinning ring. "Why did you help her? You didn't have a ticket for her." I looked out at the suns going down over a real horizon, with a child of another world warm and trusting in my arms, and I gave her the only answer I have ever had, the same one. The true one. "Because she was hungry," I said, "and I had hands." She thought about that the way children do, turning it over looking for the trick in it. There wasn't one. There never was. And after a while she stopped looking and she put her head down against my chest the way her mother used to, and the last sun went down, and the first of the 9 skis filled up with stars I had spent my whole life cleaning the windows on and never once, until now, been free to simply sit beneath and watch. That is the smallest thing that ever changed everything. It was about the size of my 2 hands cupped together, and it could not eat the gray block. So I gave it the green.